conversation about productivity. And I don't mean simply having some mechanism or some council or some body that measures productivity as gross domestic product per total hours worked per person employed. That's what we've come to know as a simple computation of productivity. And the central bank could easily do that. I don't know if they do, but we should, as a state, or the Barbados Statistical Services should be measuring productivity. We should know, for the investments that we make, what are the levels of productivity that we are getting. We should be able to measure and monitor that so that we know what parts of the productivity equation are failing. And I'll tell you what I mean. Factors have to work together. So workers and people who work also need the means of production. So they also need to have, if I work in a depot, forgive me if I tend to make some certain kinds of examples, but if I work in a depot of MTW, I also need equipment to do my work. And when I have the equipment, and the type of equipment, and whether it works well, all of that matters for my levels of productivity as a worker. Because I cannot be productive independent of those means. I can't be productive if I have to patch a pothole, and that is why I'm employed. If I get to work and there's no pothole patcher, well then, where is my productivity? And if my productivity is low, so too is the benefit to the citizen. So too is the benefit to the taxpayer. So whether, and the member for St. George North made reference to it, whether the conditions in which I work help maintain my health, so the Safety and Health at Work legislation on which the member for St. Peter spent so much effort to make sure that workers remain safe, and I'm sure will equally spend a lot of time on its implementation and monitoring, that is also a part of my productivity. When I show up to work, I have to be well while there, and hopefully the environment in which I work helps me to stay well. At the very least, it should not contribute to me not being well. So the environment in which I work, whether I have technology or other equipment that I require in order to work, there are certain things, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that have to line up at the right time. So it doesn't make sense, for example, me getting a piece of equipment in a season or in a quarter where works can't be done, where it is the worst of the rainy season and there is some downtime for the sector, and all of a sudden the equipment that needed fixing is now fixed for that period, but for the rest of the year, when it is hot and dry, I don't have any equipment to work. Productivity matters. And while I agree, and I absolutely agree, that a performance management system is important, it also has to be within the context of making sure that the people that we are assessing have the wherewithal to perform in the ways that we expect them to perform. And that also has to do with levels of investment in their training and their ongoing training. And I'm also not talking about simply sending somebody to do a training overseas and having it checked off that they have gone and been trained in generative AI, and then they come back and they're still working with one of those white IBM desktop computers that have no hope of engaging in doing any Python coding or any of the things that are needed in order to say that you are a part of the digital transformation. And there are too many times where we say, oh yes, We've trained our people in this thing, and then they come back, and there's no way that they could possibly align that investment in training with their own job or reality in which they work, and on that basis, increase their productivity. Sometimes we have this notion that productivity is only a function of whether people, how much sick leave people take. No, I'll tell you that that is a part of it. If we have situations in which we have high levels of absenteeism for whatever reason, that is also a factor. But the point I'm making, sir, is that it has to be taken and considered together. And some of the levels of frustration to which the member for St. George North referred also have to do with the fact that there are people who want to produce, and they find that they are limited in the levels of productivity that they can realize because of inputs or factors that are not provided to them. Now, sir, in all things, any conversation on rights has to be accompanied by a conversation on responsibility. And I will always make reference to both sides of that equation, that what this legislation does, and other members before me made reference to the many increases in benefits and reinforcement of benefits that over a 7-year period this Barbados Labour Party government has been able to deliver in circumstances where a previous Democratic Labour Party government over 9-10 years had never been able to deliver. And so those things are important, and the rights to those benefits and to those enhancements are important, but so too are the responsibilities to convert those benefits, or to understand that those benefits come as a part of a consideration for work that is done and service that is delivered to people. In similar ways, sir, the alignment that has to happen in the public service, the alignment between rights and responsibilities, the alignment between protection and productivity, also has to be part of a larger framework of making things work well, of having a system of governance in which things work well. And I do recall that when the National Productivity Council closed, and again, measuring productivity is not enough. It is not enough to know, just to know, well, your productivity is low or is increasing or is falling. The question is, once you have that information, then what are you going to do? And I do recall that when the National Productivity Council closed, it was replaced with what we thought was a more effective and immediate response to improving people's experience of government, because that's really what it is. When government functions well, it means that the people and businesses that require services of government are able to easily access those services. That's what it means. And at that time, I recall that we essentially replaced the National Productivity Council, or at least its function, with a multi-sectoral board made up of public sector agencies, some of the most critical ones, private sector, heavy representation from the private sector, as well as the third sector, labor, and so on. And the point of that, and when we met, the idea was that we sat department by department to address how and whether things were working well, and if they were not working well, then why not? And at the time, we had something called the Doing Business Report that since became a bit discredited, regrettably. But even though the report became discredited, some of the substance of what it was trying to say For example, how long would it take to get town planning approval? How long would it take to get a water connection installed? How long does it take to clear goods at the port? Measuring these real things in people's lives became important. Measuring those real things in people's lives remains important. And so I don't know how you would have a performance assessment of public sector workers without connecting that directly to the real and measurable outcomes that people are feeling every day. Now, the purpose of that board, and to be fair, and let me say thank you to the Barbados Private Sector Association and others in their various representations who sat in those subcommittees. And there was a subcommittee established for every nuisance that people experienced. And sir, I like to be a woman of practical affairs. Let's figure out what the nuisance is. Let's understand why, for example, it was taking people, we would say that at town planning, we increased, for example, the time that it would take to get your planning permission, but then you couldn't occupy the dwelling because it was taking so much longer to get a water connection. So then what's the point? So those committees sat and went through, both on the side of business, as well as doing beneficiary assessments of how long were people standing in the line in the pharmacy at the Queen Elizabeth Hospital. Those are the things you have to measure. If you're talking productivity, if you're talking assessing how well public workers are doing as long as they are given the inputs that they require, then you have to measure those real things. You're certainly not, you're not simply measuring, whether somebody shows up to work a certain number of days a week. You're measuring that person's output. What are they delivering against? And what they're delivering against cannot be, for example, the number of cabinet papers produced by a ministry, because the person out there does not feel that. What they have to be measured against has to do with how people experience those services. And so we can't take our eyes off that. But the debate in here today ranged, as it tends to do, a bit far and wide at times, and reference was made to the judiciary and to the notion of whether certain terms of service or the presence of contracts and so on might affect the independence of the judiciary. And I will not wade into that particular debate except to say that there seems to be a curious hierarchy, in my humble estimation, when it comes to the expectations of certain public workers. I wonder if we know what a public worker is. Someone who works for the public. And to the extent that one of the things that we measured as part of the then doing business report, the global competitiveness indices also look at this, relates to the length of time it takes to get a decision from the court. It is one of the ways we measure productivity and competitiveness domestically and globally. But quite frankly, it is also one of the things that people every day are frustrated by as they live their lives. And with all due respect to those who sit in judgment and have to give decisions, how are we, remember, we're talking rights and responsibilities. How is it that we seem to have so many conversations about terms and conditions and protection of that category of worker, and so few conversations about the responsiveness of that category of worker, about the performance, about being able to deliver decisions, to deliver judgments on cases in order to allow people to get on with their lives. I'm so sorry, but that is not a protected class of worker. But we seem to have a lot to say about performance assessments of every other category. But this is one that is so consequential to the average person, as well as to whether we are able to attract investment to this country. There are potential investors, local, regional, international, who make decisions about whether they will invest in a jurisdiction because they say, you know what? If I have to bring an action in the court, if I have to litigate a matter, well, I don't know if I'm going to get a judgment in 5 or 7 or 10 or 20 years. I can't tie up my resources in that jurisdiction. And so when we talk about assessing the performance of the public service, when we talk about how are we doing with our productivity, we have to include everyone in that conversation. There are so many ways in which the effectiveness and setting the public service up for success is material to almost everything we come in here to talk about. It is material to every time a bill is passed, and even before that bill is passed, one of the things that we have to ask ourselves is, do we have the wherewithal to actually execute this? I know the member for St. Michael South, as he puts the finishing touches on his social empowerment agency, he's grappling with that all the time. How am I setting this new agency up for success? How am I making sure, because this is a people-heavy undertaking, like so many others. And so how am I making sure that we are crafting a public service framework? And you know, it is not about coming with it's not about coming with some of these high-level standards. Standards are important. High-level standards, mission statements, all of these things are important. But for so much of this, I talk all the time about the fine work of governance. For so much of this, it is about understanding, well, why didn't this matter get from there to there? And you know, you can tell when a person has not had any interaction with governance at all from the way they talk. The Honourable Leader of the Opposition, you know, you can sit from that position, especially when you've never even deigned to interact with even the governance that happens in here, and say so many wonderful things. But I was part of a conversation yesterday, sir. You know, people walk up to us, all of us in here from time to time, and start to hold forth on what is wrong with us and the government. We all experience it, and I welcome it. And this one gentleman, very accomplished entrepreneur in his field, he was complaining about a couple ministers. And this minister has done this, and that minister has not done that. And I said to him, are you aware that ministers do not direct public officers? He was not aware. So it is one thing to say, oh, I want to remind public officers, as the Honourable Member for Christchurch South said earlier, I wanted to remind public officers that they're not accountable to ministers. They don't take direction from ministers. But at the same time, ministers in the public's mind have full accountability for the success of that ministry. And so let us be real in 2025. What is the mechanism by which a process for which the minister is accountable, for the satisfaction and the happiness of the population. That's what the minister does, that's what the cabinet is accountable for. Each MP in here knows it. So what is the process by which there's support for that execution? There is real support for that execution and for that accountability that comes back to that minister or comes back to that member of parliament. You know, I was bemused to see recent comments that suggested that there are too many MPs. I mean, and the irony of the origin of the comment from an unelected official with a platform to be able to say that what was it? If there are 30 MPs, we estimate that they have 7,000 constituents each. Well, first of all, there's some that have 10,000. But not only that, the MP now will sit weekly and meet in her or his clinic dozens of those 7 or 8 or 9 or 10 or 11,000 constituents. And enter in her system or in their notebook the range of requests and concerns that then have to do what? That then have to be directed to all the many different organs and tentacles of government. In a situation, Mr. Deputy Speaker, where actually you want to say that the public officers are not accountable to the minister, far less accountable are those public officers to a member of parliament. There is no official accountability of the public service to a member of parliament. That is not to say that I am suggesting that there ought to be. That is a conversation perhaps for us to engage in a different time and space. But at the very least, if there's no automatic feedback to say, and I want to say from the outset, that Barbadians are a very dignified people. And public officers tend to take great pride in their office. And they also tend to have a lot of respect for your office. And so it is a function of that respect that means that an MP will tend to have a positive relationship with a public officer who will say, I will get back to you, I will work on that, I will inquire on this matter. But they don't have to. In A Streetcar Named Desire, Blanche says, I've always depended on the kindness of strangers. And that's really what you do as an MP. Because in a circumstance where you may not be getting the levels of productivity that you want, or you have not set up the public service through processes for success, then you might as well be throwing pebbles at a closed window. If not for the level of dignity with which most public officers carry out their work, and the fact that it would be very rare for an officer to not respond because they happen to have respect for your office. But by the rules, they need not. And so the notion that scrambling, and forgive my non-parliamentary language, but scrambling as we are every day, fighting for our lives, to match the level of responsiveness that constituents expect, and then to hear from a member. There are too many of us. Too many of us with one staff member or with recently 2 at max. To respond to all of the different things, to call when a pipe bursts, to when a pole is leaning, to check on the old lady down the road, to be able to feed back to the members at Michael South that we have so many vulnerable individuals in this constituency in the event of a hurricane, to be able to keep, there are too many of us. I would like to suggest to the gentleman that the answer to reducing the number of us is to do everything it takes to strengthen the public service in full. I've been seeing public sector reform logos from the time I was at school, it feels like. And then we come, and sometimes we make changes at the top, and we give people titles where nobody knows really what the job description is, rather than going and looking to see, well, what is stuck here and why is it stuck? And doing the unsexy work of just getting it unstuck. And the final thing I will say on the matter, sir, is this. We cannot make policy and craft structures for people, for individuals who might be alive today. So many of the things that I see relate to, well, I know that the member for St. Philip North is this kind of person. And so since the member for St. Philip North is this kind of person, she will work well in this kind of system. And then when that kind of person goes away, you got a system that doesn't work for the next person that's coming. I implore us, sir, to improve process and systems, to engineer them so that it does not matter who is there, that they work because there are good systems and because there are good processes. I know that Barbados is small and one has to have reference to who is there at the time that you are there, but I can only implore that we begin to understand that it is process that will mean that when all of us in here are home in our rocking chairs, well, I don't plan to use a rocking chair. I plan to be climbing some peaks and watching you all on the news. But so when we have passed to different roles, that we can say, we created this system and it is still working today. That is what we are called on to do. I agree that this legislation is not a panacea. It is not intended to be, but it gives us an opportunity to identify what must be the concurrent investments in creating a public service that is set up for success and that is set up for longevity. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I'm obliged to you.
Honourable Member for St. Philip North.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. It's always nice to see you in that seat. Welcome again.
Thank you.
I have no real issues with the bill as it stands, but and I'm sure there are many members in the population who will benefit, who will have a better Christmas for the thought of getting a better salary, for getting their pensions pumped up a little bit because of the appointments. But there are a few things that I think are issues within our sector, and I would just like to speak on them. One of them, the first one, really, the member for St. Philip, for St. George South, did an excellent job of bringing it up. It has been one of my bugbears for a long time. North. I apologize, St. George North. And it has to do with the NCC workers, and they're not having the NIS paid, at least the government's contribution to the NIS fund. I have been speaking on this for a while. In fact, when I was chair of the National Assistance Board, this is one of the grossest the Prime Minister and I had. In other words, it took maybe 3 different conversations with the Prime Minister, and like the Prime Minister does, she finally agreed. And my workers at the National Assistance Board succeeded in having their NIS contributions made the government side of it. I really would like to see this with the NCC workers. They have been there for a few years and they're still not being paid through the government, the NIS, and it affects many of them. One, when a poor poor, whatever grade you choose. When a poor person has the whole money, when he was working in government and he did not notice the NIS contributions coming out, it was fine because they never saw it and never knew it, and it was just paid. You are asking people now who have, some of them many children, some of them one child, to have a look at what they have in their pockets and to take some of that money out where they would buy a loaf of bread, some milk, some cheese for their family, and to give it into NIS. Everybody does not have the insight to see the future where pensions come in, where sick leave come in. And I have had to give several of the members of the NCC, that grade of worker, sick leave because they got sick. You don't write the NIS form because it makes no sense. I'm worried about things like maternity leave. Maternity leave is now what, 4 months? 4 months without any kind of NIS contributions is criminal. These are the things that bother me. And while I am on maternity leave, I'm going to ask the Minister of Labor to remember to answer my question. I'm asking about the increase in the maternity, the length of the maternity leave. If it is, I know it was implemented. Do people that are currently on leave, is theirs extended, or would they have to stick to the 3 months if they fell into that pregnancy thing before the bill was actually passed? But that's on the side. So that's one of my worries for the NCC workers and anybody out there. I don't think there are many who are falling into this same category of not having NIS payments made. The Honourable Prime Minister spoke about the terms leave for the teachers that will be instituted again. I think it's long in coming. I never quite understood why it was stopped, but I'm happy that it will be implemented. I know too many teachers. I come out of a family of teachers that the member, the leader of the opposition mentioned that he got burned out after, how long he said? An hour of working with teenagers. Imagine what these teachers go through after 20, 30, some of them 40 years of service and only having 2 terms leave at the beginning, at the end. It's time it has been instituted. And this brings me on to another worry of mine, and I have brought it up in here before, where I have concern for early pensions for those who have been working. I know people that by the time they get to early pension, 61, well, it will be 62 at some point, they would have put in 44 years of service. And early pension means a cut of a large amount. I can't remember, 40%, maybe less, of the pension. I really would love that relooked. I don't think it's fair for people to be working that long and then have to, because they're not able or they just reach the age when they need to relax, to have a reduced pension to that degree. When I was a minister in Ministry of Health, one of the things that struck me, and up to this day, I still get calls. I don't know if the present Minister of Health or the minister in the ministry is getting them, but I get calls almost maybe once a month where employees want to be appointed, but they're listed as temporary or substitute workers. And some of them have been doing that for many years. The explanation I got from the HR department at one point was that they know they would be hired as temporary staff, they know that there will be substitutes, and they really have no place for them. But I am asking that that be looked at. I'm asking that they have be among the group that have the first opportunity to be placed in post. I have met some that have 7, 8 years subbing. You really can't get a loan with that. You can't do a whole lot of subbing. Nobody will believe that your salary will be permanent, will be steady, for instance. And this is one of the bugbears that it needs to be looked into. The Prime Minister, the Honourable Prime Minister, also mentioned very briefly medical boarding as part of this. Where I sit, medical boarding sometimes is too slow. Whether it be where you have the opportunity to be interviewed by the board, or if you happen to get through that and you're given permission to come up medically unfit, the process of actually starting the pensions is laborious and long in coming. I could think of one recently, really, that she took a whole year off before she saw a cent. In fact, she went so far as to be getting her NAS for nearly 2 years, which we all know that it shouldn't be so, and now she's forced to pay it back. Now it has started. I think the process needs working on. You cannot really have a patient out there not having an income, because after a year, NAS payments stop. or your salary is cut in half, whichever. So this is something that is troubling me to some extent, the expediency of the medical boarding. And I think 2 members mentioned so far, it's okay to appoint individuals, but there must be some accountability in terms of their performance. I think there's a general consensus amongst the population, where when people are appointed, work ceases. The quality of the work, and don't misconstrue what I'm saying, is clearly not the majority, but the quality of work in some areas where people have got their appointments has deteriorated, and I don't think anybody can deny that. The phones, and we know it, when we call a government office, sometimes the phone, you have to call, there's a window, for instance, and NAS is one of the areas. There's a window if you call after 8, but before 9, you might get through. Lunchtime is a no-no. Don't call between 12 and 1:30, because you missed the boat. But if you don't get between 1:30 and 2, work finished till 4. And this is something that we see constantly. And I think the Honourable Member for St. Michael South Central kind of said it, but I would say it plainly. Accountability needs to be put in place for people like that. In other words, appointment should not mean you can't be sent home. And that's the general consensus. I think in the rules it's possible, but nobody really believes it. And I think this is one of the reasons a lot of people, when they're looking for jobs, they specify that they need to work in government. Why do you want to work in government, they say? Half of them now don't know. It used to be stability. Half of them now don't know, but there are certain jobs that they're specifically asked for. And you know it too, Deputy Speaker. You know the jobs. There are about 3 of them that they always ask for. And watching it is either that they get away with stuff, they leave early, they don't have to work too hard. These are the things that we need to address in terms of accountability. Not only that, and to educate the public. You see the sick leave thing? I have people coming to me, 6 days sick leave, and they will say to you, I ain't taken all of mine yet, so you won't know. Sick leave is for sick. Vacation is for leave, otherwise. But there are many members of society that figure they have to complete the 6 days or however long the discretion of the employer, they have to complete those before they consider that they have earned anything. But the public, and I had the privilege of listening to, I think, somebody from the Treasury, speaking about the effects sick leave has on your pension. A lot of people don't know this. They figure you get sick leave, nothing happens, but then it affects the pension. And I think we as a government need to push this, and I know NAS has been doing a lot of public, what's the word? Engagement with respect to pensions and whatever. But things like that the public needs to be educated on that end of it. And I was talking, let me just get back a little bit, I missed the note, where you think that after appointments, the work deteriorates. And I have been getting over several weeks, I'm not the only one, it's in the newspaper, it's on the call-in program, it's everywhere. With respect to licensing authority, not answering, if you go down there for an appointment, you can't get through, come back tomorrow. If you're going in for driver's license, 50 people booked at the same time, and I'm sure they're not 50 testers. So you get to, go back home, come back next week. Never mind, you took the day off work to do the test. I have, and this is irking me to no end. For the last 28 years, I've been writing letters to the NAS. We can do it online, but for some reason, mine does not work. To get certificates of health for people over a certain age. All of a sudden, the same letter I put to whom it may concern, my 75-year-old people are being sent back home because they did not have a licensing authority. When I did English, to whom it may concern meant to whom it may concern. These are things that waste time. Okay, I put licensing authority points in Michael or wherever. The person sent it back. You did not put chief licensing officer. All the letter says you are fit to drive. These things delay the system. I have people that are waiting for licensing for buses and taxis and whatever. Insurance has to be paid. The time is soon up and they can't get through. The latest though, which I thought is a little suspect, and I'm glad the leader of the opposition is not here. One of my constituents went in yesterday You know people are attached to the license plate. I had mine for years. My father had mine before he doesn't drive now, but before I was born. Whether it be superstition, attachment to the number, everybody in here, I believe, goes through that. My constitution was told, when you look in your system, your ID card, you're registered for St. Philip North, you cannot have back your license. You have to go down to Warren's to make sure that the registrar, whoever, puts you for St. Michael's so that you can retain your license. This is a gross waste of time in a system and a society where things are supposed to flow better. We're supposed to be stepping into whichever century, but I lose it sometimes. So that's just a prime example of what is happening in the system when we are supposed to be better. And the last thing I think, well, I'll make it the last, the other one might get me in trouble. But the last thing I want to talk about is the private sector. I remember for St. George North. I can't help but mention the private sector. No, all this is about government stuff and whatever. And there are restaurants, I need taking off that restaurant out there that I know for a fact. I try boycotting, but sometimes when I'm hungry, I gotta go drive-through. And they treat their staff like dirt, right? I have had a client of mine that was fired because she was asked to work overtime. They're given lunch or dinner or whatever you choose to call it. She was asked to work overtime. She got her daughter picked up and put her there. She gave her daughter her lunch. And that's not supposed to happen. You're supposed to eat your lunch. But you're asked to work overtime, and you said, my child is here with me, she has to eat. She was fired for that. I had another one coming in and tears. Doc, I got 12, because you know the food is deducted. I got 12 veggie burgers deducted from my salary last month, and I never even taste the veggie burger. And you know the reason this is happening? People are afraid for their jobs. People are afraid, and they tell you that they are afraid to actually join a union because of the backlash that they see from they anticipate from the employers. I'm gonna ask the honorable member that's sitting obliquely across from me for St. George North to have a look at these things. I'll be happy to tell her what is happening. But instances like that Barbadians in this to 2026 almost have no right dealing with. So I'm just bringing up one of the things. I will cross off this one that will put me in trouble, don't look. And I would just say the bill is a good bill. The amendment is a good amendment. I support it wholeheartedly. And thank you so much for your ear. Thank you.
You're welcome. Honourable member for St. Joseph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The honourable member, leader of the opposition, considered this amendment to be one in the nature of a pre-election exercise. We've so often said that it's never the wrong time to do a right thing. But if you look at the history of this administration and our approach to the public service, you'd be able to put this amendment bill into its true context. The Prime Minister brought to the memory of the Chamber the fact that the original stance of legislating appointments was one adopted by a Barbados Labour Party administration in early 2018, where when we passed the new Public Service Act, we deemed that any person who had been in a post for 3 years up to a particular date was automatically appointed to the public service. It was something, sir, that I believe was popular largely for public servants. But yes, it did present a few difficulties for some people. Individuals were concerned about why 3 years and not 4, or why 3 years and not 2. Some were concerned that individuals who were not the best employee in their mind, the best public servant in their mind, would still benefit from the appointment. But the fact is, Mr. Speaker, that a government has to govern for the largest swath of its population at any given time. And when I use that term, I'm not speaking about a large number, a large percentage of the population, but more trying to govern for the maximum number of people at any given time. There's a school of law called the School of American Realism, which says that you must administer the affairs of the state with the minimum of friction and waste. The fact is, and history shows this, the processes in relation to ensuring that public servants get appointments is one that has historically not been efficient. The process of making sure that public servants receive promotions, again, not efficient. So from time immemorial, Mr. Speaker, we've had this concept of a public servant who is acting up. And that doesn't mean being uppity. It just means that you are acting in a post higher than yours. Because perhaps the individual whose post you're acting in has themselves been acting in a higher post, or may have left the service altogether. And sometimes decades pass before an individual can be appointed to the post. There are similarly numerous instances where individuals are acting in posts several times higher than theirs because they've been put to act, and then an opportunity comes up and then they're put to act again and again and again. Then in fact their substantive post may be one of a clerical officer in the public service, but they're acting many times in a far, far higher post. These inefficiencies in the public service and in the administration of the public service, Mr. Speaker, create numerous challenges for the public servants whose responsibility it is to keep the engine of state running. They're demoralized. They feel that they're burdened by a system that is not fair. They often feel that they're not being recognized for their hard work. And woe betide them if, after acting in a post for 10 years, the person whose substantive post it is comes back, and you are told that you have to revert. You may have been in a senior post for a decade, but then be told that you have to revert back to a far lower post. And then you have to grapple with the factors such as reduced salary and things of that sort. Mr. Deputy Speaker, these are the kinds of harsh realities that forced a Barbados Labour Party administration in 2018 to say, enough of this. Enough of this. If you've been in a post for 3 years, the system ought to have recognized that you were either good or no good, and ought to have responded appropriately. If the system does not respond, then we cannot continue to hold up the march of time and the march of progress. And that was the kind of consideration that I, in fact I can say it, I was Attorney General at the time, and therefore I remember meeting well into the late hours at night to try to get this particular formulation right. Then, as is now, it was well received by the public servants. Already this morning, sir, when this debate started, I received a WhatsApp message from a public servant who said, "Thank you so much. I've been in this post now acting for the last 4 years." And the individual in particular is one who has done extraordinarily well in his position. But if he had to wait until the PAD or whatever other acronym we use for it, the Ministry of the Public Service, got around to working on his appointment, he'd probably be there for another 10 years. So already, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, what we are doing today has begun to resonate in their public. It has begun to resonate with their families. It has begun to resonate with the individuals who show up every single day and work and work and work. Now, let's not fool ourselves. There are going to be people who have been acting in a position and who have not exactly been the best of stewards. But that is human nature, sir. That is what happens in every entity. And they too will receive the benefit of this statutory appointment to their posts. And the public service will simply have to address those situations on a case-by-case basis. But I am not one, Mr. Speaker, who is prepared to throw the baby for the bathwater. Yes, some people will slip in through that means. We may all know a few of them. But I'm satisfied that this amendment bill will do the greatest good for the greatest number of our public servants. But, Mr. Speaker, we have been mindful in the preparation of this bill to take into account instances where it would be unwise to allow an automatic appointment. And so, this bill excludes in its operation members of the police service and members of the police service and members of the, I think it's prison service. Yes. And it is wise to make those exclusions, sir, because those particular institutions are institutions of a particular nature. But it is also important for me to point out that under Section 6 of this bill, we stipulate here that individuals will not be eligible for an appointment to an office where you are the subject of a disciplinary matter. So if there's a pending disciplinary matter, you will not get the benefit of this appointment. If you're the subject of an ongoing criminal matter, you will not get the benefit of this appointment. If you were convicted of an offense and your conviction has not been expunged, you will not get the benefit of the appointment. Similarly, if you're on medical leave for a period of at least 3 months, or if your personnel records show a negative report or report with misconduct under the public service. So the fact is that we've tried to take into account instances, Mr. Speaker, where it would be foolhardy to make appointments by virtue of this statute in this particular way. Now, a question has arisen, Mr. Speaker, whether this applies to statutory bodies. People have been asking, and I think it's important to explain, sir, that the Public Service Act defines who public officers are. And if you will just bear with me, I will refer you to the relevant provision. This bill defines a public officer and it defines public service. And in the interpretation of public service means service. Public service means the service of the Crown in a civil capacity in respect of the government of Barbados, but shall not be construed as including, and it goes on, sir, the office of a member or the holder of any office of any board, committee, or other statutory or other similar body, whether incorporated or not. It also deals with judges and so on. But, Mr. Speaker, by and large, we have tried to address the situation here to make sure that this bill covers off all of the people that absolutely need to be covered off to try to protect them. Now, does it come at a good time? Yes, it does. But for those people who think that we're doing this on the eve of Christmas because of some political sleight of hand or some ploy. Very far from the case. This is a matter, sir, which we did in 2020. And in 2020, there was no election around the corner. There's no election around the corner. We're doing it now because it is something that is important. And we've said to the public service, you've had 5 years since we last did it. Please let us get it right this time. So we're back here, sir. The leader of the opposition has spoken extensively, perhaps super extensively, on a number of things. He spoke about the police service. I don't know really how the police service arose in this context, but I do want to say a few things, sir. The honourable member has suggested a number of things that the police service is not treated properly by this administration. You know, I keep saying, and I know the public is tired of us saying the last administration did this and the last administration did that. But I want to remind the honourable member that by taking up the leadership of the last administration, he has to own all of the wrong things that they did. Even when owning them puts him in a position of adopting a hypocritical stance. The last administration intentionally ravaged the Barbados Police Service because they had the misguided notion that there would be some political benefit to be received by acting in a particularly partisan way. We all know that those instances, and you recall what I'm talking about, that was an instance where the commissioner at the time made recommendations for promotions, but they waited until the commissioner was out of the island and calling his deputy, who then made other recommendations, and they accepted the recommendations of the deputy and not the recommendations of the commissioner. It spawned a lawsuit where I believe 19 members of the Barbados Police Service, all represented by the leader of the opposition, had to take the government to court. I had to settle that matter as Attorney General with the honourable member because it was the right thing to do. And the honourable member knows that if there is any instance where the Barbados Police Service was hard done by, it would have been the treatment that was meted out to them by the last administration. It was in 2013, sir, that the flexi allowance was cut by the last administration. 2013, sir. And the flexi allowance was put into place by a Barbados Labour Party administration to take into account the fact that a policeman will work all night, a shift that may end at 8 o'clock. And instead of being able to go home and rest, he got to go to court. And he has to go to court, and he has to perform as if he is absolutely sharp. Because he has to have his notes, he has to go to court, and he has to say, this is my evidence. And equally, sir, in the course of an investigation, a police officer doesn't get to say, well, my 8 hours done. He sometimes has to be on duty for 24 hours. Dealing with a particular case, and therefore we recognize that these things meant that they were not being properly compensated, and we put in place a system where you can claim flexi time. Okay, so all of the time spent outside of your normal duty hours, you were compensated and compensated reasonably well for it. But who stopped it? The last administration stopped it in 2013. It took until 2018 when we came back to government to restore that payment, sir. Now, the honourable member has poo-pooed our efforts at trying to bring some tangible recognition to the work of the police service. I don't know whose brief he is reading from, but certainly the police officers that I come into contact on a daily basis are more than happy to be recognized as a senior constable. Those who are detectives are pleased at the opportunity to be able to earn a premium for their work. Now, from day one, we have said, Mr. Speaker, that we cannot take out the police service and deal with their salaries. We have to have the regrading. And we've given the police service that the regrading process it is going to be done across the entire public service. It will address the relativities and cases where those relativities are not properly recognized, they will be recognized. So I'm quite sure that in 2026, we will have an environment where the police service will see themselves benefiting from far better salary scales than they currently benefit from. But in the meantime, what have we done, sir? The last administration said, we're going to get duty-free cars and houses for the police, the nurses, and the teachers. That was the extent of their contribution to the welfare of police, nurses, and teachers. Now, let me be clear. I'm not saying that duty-free cars and houses was the extent. I'm saying that what they said was the extent. That is all that they did. They said duty-free cars and houses. As if the police service and if the nurses and teachers in Barbados were only interested in duty-free cars. But, sir, again, contrast what they said with what we did. When we established HOPE, we gave a mandate to that agency to seek out police officers and teachers and give them first pick at the housing opportunities. For the first time in the history of our country, sir, we selected those individuals, the nurses, the teachers, the police officers, and we said, you have to put these people to the front of the line. A recognition of the awesome responsibility that they have in holding our society together. But let me also remind you that year on year since coming to government, we have increased the budget of the Barbados Police Service so as to make sure that that this service will be among the best equipped police service in the region. Now, I know it is easy to say, well, that is just giving them things. But whenever we grant the request of the police service for better equipment, better cars, better devices, better instruments, it is with a view, sir, of making their jobs easier. So we don't just offer to give the police digital devices. We give them digital devices so as to be able to transform how they do their day-to-day duties. So that instead of sitting and writing up page after page of notes in a physical police diary, they have the opportunity to record it digitally and keep it there in case it is needed. All of these things, Mr. Deputy Speaker, serve to improve the conditions under which our police officers work. It was the Barbados Labour Party administration that introduced the very first gym to the police service, something that has fallen into abeyance. And even before we get into the estimates process, for the year 2026-27, we are providing the police service with funding to re-equip those dormant gym facilities to make sure that in terms of their health and wellness, they have an opportunity to maintain that health and wellness and to be able to function at an optimum level. So, Mr. Speaker, it is right for him to speak to the chamber and to try to suggest that we haven't done anything. But we know that we've done a lot. 46 special constables have been transitioned to police constables. What the honourable member might not realize is that special constables are set at a contractually fixed rate, while members of the police service benefit from increments. So by transitioning a special constable into a police constable, they now are in a zone or in a stream which will allow them not just to get increments on their salaries, but also to get promotions, because in the special constable regimen, there is no promotion. But you are now able, when you transition, so we now have 46 new police constables who will not only get increments, but will also have promotion opportunities. These are all tangible things. And we have increased the complement of special constables by a further 60, and I believe we have successfully recruited additional special constables to fill those 60 ranks. I believe almost every week, Mr. Speaker, Mr. Deputy Speaker, you will have been seeing the recruitment fairs. You've been seeing the recruitment fairs. Police are in our community recruiting individuals to join the police service, and successfully so. But they also are providing opportunities for us to do an interesting thing by getting young people in, and sometimes old people in, to interface with our police officers, see what they do, get a better understanding for how they operate. We are also building goodwill in our communities for the police service, something that has been dying in recent times. Mr. Speaker, we do not take the work that the police service, the nurses and the teachers do for granted. They are perhaps the glue that keeps our society together. But in a sense, Mr. Speaker, an engine has many parts, and you really can't say that one part is more important than the other. All of them are important. So whether an individual is acting as a custodian in the public service or acting as a manager, whether you're acting in a clerical capacity or acting in a specialist capacity, all are integral parts of our operation, and all will stand to benefit from this particular exercise. As always, though, the Leader of the Opposition can't help but try to drag a few red herrings across the path. And I don't know how he strayed into the Constitution, but he said that this is a Constitution Amendment bill. Now, I think I have a duty to explain why it is treated as a Constitution Amendment bill. Public servants are, technically speaking, appointed by the President. That is provided in the Constitution. But none of us in here are the President, we're the Parliament. And therefore, by virtue of the fact that we are making the appointment, we are taking that power away from the President. So in a purely technical sense, we, as a Parliament, are usurping the power of the President that is established in the Constitution. Now, our Constitution says there are many ways of changing the Constitution. Some are textual, some are non-textual. Sometimes you change the Constitution by implication. But when the Honourable Member speaks about this being an amendment to the Constitution, it is treated as amending the Constitution only because we are, in a sense, taking the power of the President to make appointments and making them ourselves. But that is the power that we have, because the Constitution says that Parliament makes laws for the peace, order, and good government of the country. And this is perhaps one of the finest examples. Before I wrap up, though, let me just address another red herring that the Leader of the Opposition dragged across the trail. He spoke about the appointment of temporary judges. Now, again, I don't know how this got into the subject matter, but so as not to have any silliness abounding at this time of year or going abroad, I think it's important that I address it. The Honourable Member has suggested that by appointing temporary judges, that we are acting in breach of the Constitution because we are appointing judges in a way that does not guarantee them the independence that the judiciary is required to have. Now, I don't know how you could argue that something that is specifically allowed in the Constitution, when you do it, you are in breach of the same Constitution. Let me say it again. You cannot argue that if we do something that is specifically permitted in the Constitution, in fact, contemplated by the Constitution, that we could be in breach. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Supreme Court of Judicature Act in Section 4 says that the High Court shall consist of 13, the Chief Justice, and 13 judges. the Chief Justice, and 13 judges. That's the number that is stipulated. But in Section 82(2) of the Constitution, it says that if the Chief Justice at any time feels that the business of the court is such that it requires the appointment of additional judges, those additional judges can be appointed on a temporary basis. So the Constitution sets a limit of, the Supreme Court of Judicial Act sets a limit of 13. But then the Constitution says if the business of the court requires, you can appoint additional judges. But sir, if you are at 13, any other judges that you bring on have to be on contract because you can't appoint more than 13. Plain and simple. And this was so when the number of judges was 9, it was so when the number of judges was 5. So the point is that the Constitution recognizes that there may come a time when the number of judges that has been statutorily set will not be sufficient to discharge the work that is before the Supreme Court. And it gives the Chief Justice the opportunity to bring on additional judges. But because you can't appoint them permanently, the only way you can bring them on is on contract. Now I understand that the leader of the opposition spent a little time in the Turks and Caicos, practicing a little law. Stories that have reached me have said that he was not at all stellar when he served over there. In fact, I understand that he brought some significant embarrassment to the legal profession, not there, but in Barbados, because he behaved in a way, excusing himself from a case by email. And the judge was so horrified that he had to ask if that is how lawyers practice law in Barbados. It is curious that the case that he was working on in Turks and Caicos was a case for a then disgraced premier whose last name was Missick. Now, I don't know how much attention he really paid to what was happening. But I know that he was in Turks and Caicos in 2016, working for Missick. But if he troubled to learn anything about where he was going, or to read the law about anything that might have been relevant, he would have come across a case from 2015, the year before, a case called Missick and Others Against the Queen. And in the case of Missick, the Turks and Caicos administration felt that they could not find a judge in Turks and Caicos who didn't know Missick and who would be able to do the case. And they therefore brought in a retired judge from Jamaica, to do the case. And they appointed him on contract. Get this, so they appointed this judge on contract to do this case. And the lawyers in Turks and Caicos argued that it was unconstitutional to have a judge on contract. And the Privy Council ruled that is not correct. It is not unconstitutional. And they upheld the argument of the state, which said that you can bring this judge in to work on contract. So it's a curious state of affairs that the leader of the opposition who worked for Missick, in the jurisdiction where Missick had ruled, been deposed, and whose case was being done, well, he's a King's Counsel, so, you know, he ought to know what's happening before the King's Privy Council. But the very Privy Council that he obviously worships ruled that having a judge on contract was not unconstitutional. But the Privy Council ruled that having a judge on contract was not unconstitutional. I would have thought that the Honourable Leader of the Opposition would have known about this case, but perhaps that is why he had to come back to Barbados with his tail between his legs, rejected by the administration of Turks and Caicos, who was paying all of his legal fees. Mr. Speaker, It is unfortunate, though, that the Honourable Member would try to create an impression that we have judges on our High Court bench who, as he well knows, because he practices before them, are working night and day and providing yeoman service to help to get down some of the backlog. And I'm not going to talk about that now. Another day will come. But I am satisfied that we have individuals of the highest integrity who are working in our judicial system, whether on contract or not. And it is really unfortunate the Honourable Member would try to suggest that they are operating in less than appropriate conditions. They have the exact benefits, the exact same salary, the exact same allowances as the judges who are permanently appointed. The only difference is that they cannot be appointed for a number of reasons. In one case, one is too old to be appointed. One has surpassed the retirement age. So even if he wanted to, he couldn't be appointed because he's not eligible for appointment. But he has been working and working remarkably well. But as I said, that was a red herring the Honourable Member tried to drag across the trail to distract from what is before the chamber. This chamber is being asked today to follow what we did in 2018 and what we did again in 2020. In each case, we did it because it was the right thing to do. In each case, it is going to benefit hundreds and hundreds of Barbadians. As I've said, they've already begun to reach out to express their satisfaction. And if the Honourable Member seems to feel that this is some political ploy, I can only assure him that it will not make any difference to his political fortunes one way or another. So ploy or no ploy, he will meet his demise at the polls. I will on that occasion be a spectator. I'll be a spectator and nothing more. Mr. Speaker, I think we've labored a bit long on this one. I think that Barbadians will recognize it for what it is. It is a recognition that there are some clear inadequacies in the system, but you have to understand that the public service is numbering almost 20,000 people. And with the best will in the world, it is difficult to keep all of those balls in the air at the same time. Simple as that. I'm sure if you went to a Barbadian community like Sagicor, you would probably find they got 30 or 40 people in the HR department, dealing with a few hundred people. The government's resources and its ability, we would probably need a HR department of maybe 1,000 people in order to be able to adequately manage the demands. Now, I'm not making excuses for them, but that is the reality. The important thing is that a caring government recognizes when it cannot allow the system to so collapse as to make forward movement impossible. And therefore, we've taken that policy decision and we've decided to come to Parliament and pass this bill to do that which the public service has not been able to do for the people who keep our engine purring and purring well. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I am happy to support this bill. If there are individuals who think of it as a Christmas gift, then let me be among the first to wish them Merry Christmas. If there are those who feel it is a political ploy, well, I can only say to them that having done it in 2018, having done it again in 2020 when there was no election, our history shows that as a party we are prepared to make the difficult decisions and to govern, because that is what we do. Timing in this instance has nothing to do with anything more than that too much time has passed before the matter has been addressed. I'm obliged to you for your consideration.
Thank you. Madam Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I want to thank all members who took the opportunity to speak in this most important of debates for the well-being of just under 2,100 public servants. This will make a meaningful difference to their lives, not only in terms ultimately of their earnings, but their pensions, their security. With respect to those who are being appointed for the first time, many of us know that without that appointment, it would be difficult for them to secure hire purchase or other credit-related benefits in the local economy. And therefore, this is not a small thing. It is a big thing. I have heard the Leader of the Opposition, and as usual, he has found his way over and around circles to say things that really don't add up to much. The learned Attorney General has already spoken to this issue that he made a big deal about with respect to the judges on contract. And in fact, the judgment of the Privy Council is there for him to read. I can well understand why memories of Turks and Caicos may give him headaches and heartaches, because the judge in that case described his behavior in words that might be unparliamentary if I were to repeat them in here. Suffice it to say, however, that the government continues to do the things that will make a difference to providing security of tenure and stability to persons wherever possible, and particularly to households. With respect to my ministry of the public service, I think that the fact that we do not yet have a situation where the HR management information system is fully functional continues to be a major humbug for us. I anticipate that during 2026, this system will be functional. But I also make the point that it is the duty of permanent secretaries and heads of departments and heads of agencies to also go out of their way, as we've said to them over and over. And if you have people who have not received their salaries because the authorities have not come back down for them so to do, then this is not a case of the Ministry of Public Service being in Tanzania and your line ministry being in Croatia. We all operate within the same functioning in Barbados. Pick up the phone, call the Ministry of Public Service, and get the requisite authorities prioritized. But in the meantime, permanent secretaries have the authority, once they're satisfied that the work has been done, to be able to recommend payment and get the paperwork done as a matter of urgency. But the notion that any of us will preside over somebody not being paid for a month, 2 months, 3 months, 4 months is completely unacceptable. And I've said so over and over from the beginning of this government's tenure. I have, as Prime Minister, always repeated, do unto others as you would have them do unto you. There is none of us in here who would be happy working for a period of time and not being paid. We've also looked at the issue of more devolution of power, and that, I hope, during 2026 can be reviewed. But that also needs us to have a functioning HRMIS if we are going to have the requisite reports and the requisite information that will allow us to make decisions in a quick and orderly manner. So I encourage persons who are affected in any way negatively to continue to reach out to us so that we can resolve the problems for you. Not only my office, but the Office of Citizen Engagement and Media Relations has been set up to be able to help us resolve, investigate, and resolve issues for people that are not yet systemic. If they become systemic, we send them to the Ombudsman, who has a much broader remit to bring order to these matters. There's one other matter that I would like to speak to, because the economic diversification and growth bill that we brought to this Parliament, and with your permission, I just simply say, without encroaching on any matters, that I have heard a lot of the debate. I'm satisfied that we have strong and transparent guardrails, but the private sector has asked for one more, which can be accommodated in regulations, and that is simply one that speaks to if the minister deviates for whatever reason from the advice from the advisory committee and in fact the National Growth Council, that he can and must lay his reasons for deviation in the House of Parliament, which we have no difficulty with, because 99% of the time the minister is acting consistent with the recommendation that they've given. There are very few occasions where there's room for variation, but I'm not going to agree that equally he should be a rubber stamp. So that the point of meeting their concerns and still giving the minister the right to be able to treat to these issues, is that we lay in Parliament any deviation from the recommendations of the Advisory Committee or the National Growth Council. But let me also, while I'm at it, sir, point out that we would do well, and I will ask the Director of Finance and others to speak to the country. If you go and do your own research, the entire world, sir, is moving away. Many countries are moving away to cash grant style cost-based investment support mechanisms instead of looking at concessions alone. May I remind this honorable chamber that in a budget a few years ago, we had to address the issue that we as a country waive over $875 million a year in tax concessions, from hotels to farms to plantations to all other kinds, to low-income housing, to all other kinds of activities in this country, going way back, and many of them are anchored under specific statutory frameworks, Tourism Development Act, others pertaining to agriculture, but they are equally captured under Chapter 67B, duties, taxes, and other payments orders, that has been with us virtually for our entire period of time as an independent nation. Now, what this bill that was before the Honourable Chamber does is ask for $75 million a year to be able to provide subsidies to maintain jobs, particularly only to those people who will give us more than 100 jobs. But more importantly, the $75 million is not even 10% of what the government of Barbados is waiving consistently in tax concessions and tax waivers on an annual basis. Now, what is the difference? You will see an order under duties, taxes, and other payments say, we give these persons these exemptions or these tax concessions. They don't tell you numbers, so people don't see it, so people don't get titillated in the same way. The number in this bill is a subsidy. It is therefore not the subject of discussions between the Revenue Authority and the individual applicant. Let me go through, because all of us know that USA, Europe, China, almost all of the developed countries in the world as well, provide subsidies for agricultural production and industrial production. But I want to go even further. Vietnam, and the research shows clearly, sir, that several countries have moved to cash grant style investment support mechanisms for high-tech, research and development sectors in response to the OECD Pillar 2 top-up tax concerns. Vietnam, 2024, established an investment support fund. United Kingdom has shifted part of its incentive mix towards expenditure-based research and development relief and direct funding programs, rather than profit-linked tax holidays, in parallel with legislating a domestic top-up, a multinational top-up tax designed to qualify under the OECD Same Globe rules. Singapore has had a long-standing use of cash grant-style programs, such as the Enterprise Development Grant and other cost-sharing schemes for innovation and expansion, especially in strategic sectors, operating as an alternative or a complement to tax holidays. And those are framed around qualifying activities, employment, and investment metrics, similar to what we have done here. United States, at the federal level and at the state level, cash grants and cost-sharing arrangements, for example, under industrial policy or research and development programs, are cited in comparative work on cash grant schemes as substitutes, once again, or complements to traditional tax incentives. And I can go on and on. Mr. Deputy Speaker, I ask us to apply our hearts to wisdom and to recognize that this is a matter of fundamental import, where there is clearly not just an asymmetry of power that exists between us and entities like the OECD, but an asymmetry of information. and that people do not have the information, but are seeking to cause people to react in ways that make no sense and that will undermine the economic stability of this country. This government will not do it. The easiest thing for us to do was to take the politically easy position. We are not going to do it and not going to put this economy and this stability for the households and personnel of this country at risk. In fact, contrary to that, that is why we are here now, seeking to appoint 2,095 people with an understanding that this is going to anchor their stability in their households and in their ability to be able to access credit in this country. So I thank all members who have spoken. I look forward to this matter being proclaimed, and as of the 1st of January 2026, the appointments which are intended to take place here, that they shall be so deemed. And similarly, if there are people who feel that they have been prejudiced, as the legislation provides for, then you have the right and opportunity to write the president and have the president review your matter, as happened under the previous legislation in 2020, where we were able to give virtually 2/3 of the people who appealed satisfaction through the president's determination that they were in fact entitled to appointment. This has worked well for us. I want, however, with the HRMIS, as we have seen since 2020, to continue to see a decline in the numbers of persons who remain unappointed for long periods of time. The performance review system is absolutely critical to us getting this right. With those few words, I beg to move, sir, that this bill be now read a second time.
Wait a second.
The motion is this bill be read a second time. All those members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg that you do now leave the chair and this House resolve itself into committee.
Beg second.
The motion is that I do not leave the chair and this House resolve itself into committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Now, this Honourable House is now in committee.
Mr. Chairman, clauses 1 through 5.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 1 through 5 stand part, sir.
The question is that clauses 1 through 5 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Clauses 6 through 9.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that clauses 6 through 9 stand part.
The question is that clauses 6 through 9 stand part. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
Report.
Mr. Chairman, I beg to move that you do now leave the chair and report progress of a bill passing in committee without amendment to His Honour the Speaker.
The question is that I do now report to His Honour the Deputy Speaker the passing of one bill in committee. All honourable members in favour, say aye. Honourable members against, say no. Methinks the ayes have it.
The chairman of committees has reported the passing of one bill in committee. All those honorable members in favor, please say.
Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill be now read a third time.
Beg to second that.
The motion is this bill be now read a third time. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Deputy Speaker, I beg to move that this bill do now pass and be cited as the Public Service Appointments Act of 2025.
Beg to second that.
The question is that this bill now the question is that the Public Service Act 2025 be right. The question is that the Public Service Act 2025 be so cited and do no pass. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, this bill is being passed under Section 49 of the Constitution, which requires a 2/3 majority, so we therefore need to take the vote at this time. Ms. Motley?
Aye.
Ms. Bradshaw?
Aye.
Mr. Marshall?
Aye.
Mr. Simmons?
Aye.
Dr. Duguid?
Aye.
Ms. Husbands?
Aye.
Mr. Abrams?
Aye.
Mr. Weir?
Aye.
Mr. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Griffith? Mr. Jordan?
Aye.
Mr. Humphrey?
Aye.
Mr. Goodenedge?
Aye.
Ms. McConney?
Aye.
Mr. Gibbs?
Aye.
Mr. Lane? Ms. Moore?
Aye.
Mr. Sutherland?
Aye.
Ms. Ford?
Aye.
Mr. Phillips?
Aye.
Dr. Brown?
Aye.
Miss Cattle?
Yes.
Dr. Springer?
Aye.
Mr. Ishmael?
Aye.
Mr. Blackman?
Aye.
Mr. Deputy Speaker? 25 honorable members voted in favor of the bill. Therefore means the 2/3 majority threshold has been reached and therefore passed in accordance with the Constitution. You can end.
The mo. Go ahead. The motion is that 25 honorable members are in favor of this bill, and I am pleased to announce that the Public Service Amendment Act 2025 is now passed.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, recommittal of government notices.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to give notice of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2025.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, recommittal of first readings of bills.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I beg to move the first reading of the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2025.
The motion is that there is amendment to the Road Traffic Amendment Bill 2025. All those honorable members, we read it first time, my apologies. All those honorable members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it.
We commit of government business.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. My task at this point, sir, is very simple. We have come to the end of what has been a very arduous year, and I want to take this opportunity on behalf of my colleagues and certainly on behalf of the Leader of the Opposition, who has seen it fit not to grace us with his presence at this point in time, which for all the time that I've been in this place has been the distinct honor of both Leader of the Opposition as well as the Leader of the party, of the ruling party, to be able to say a special message to the people of Barbados and certainly to thank all of the persons who have enabled us to be here throughout the entire year. And so I do so on his behalf and certainly on the behalf of all of my distinguished colleagues here this afternoon, to wish everyone a Merry Christmas as well as a prosperous and happy New Year. This year we have perhaps passed over 60 pieces of legislation. This government, I believe, has been one of the most hard-working administrations in the history of Barbados since independence. It goes without saying that we have the pleasure of being led by one of the most powerful figures that Barbados has ever seen in the form of our Prime Minister, Amor Motley, Honourable Member for St. Michael Northeast, and the person with whom each of us are reminded every day of the reason why we are here and what we come to this place in order to do. Today has been no different, Mr. Deputy Speaker. All of us are very proud of the way we have closed off today's session because we have yet again been able to demonstrate by the passage of the last bill that we recognize that there are some people who will have a better Christmas as a result of us being able to make wrong things right. And I refer specifically to the public officers who we needed to ensure that they were certainly recognized after their 3 years of service to have their relevant appointments put in place. And so while we continue over the course of the next few days to celebrate with our constituents and to celebrate with the country, we are mindful that it has been a rough year for many people, but we are also mindful that across our ministries, we continue to do the business of the people who sent us here. And for that, I think I can say that all honourable members are truly appreciative of their constituents and certainly all Barbadians for giving us all the opportunity to be in this place and to serve. Throughout this last year, I think we have seen a return of what Parliament used to be, where we have seen more and more young people coming to the Parliament, sitting in the public gallery. And I want to thank them particularly for their presence here, from the students at the primary level, the secondary level, the tertiary level, certainly have been coming and engaging with us. And I think holding us all to account and reminding us of the reason why we get up on mornings to go to work. And we truly appreciate the fact that the public gallery, sometimes when you look around, you see young people in the audience, and it really is a distinct reminder of what our purpose has been in coming to public office. I want to thank the people who make what we do possible. Certainly our public servants who have been working with us in various ministries to be able to allow us to bring the level of legislation to this place. Also to the clerks at the head table, to the staff, the administrative staff here at Parliament, to certainly you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, and to the substantive speaker as well, and to our police service who have again been able to protect us, and touch wood, we've had no incidences in this particular chamber, certainly, or around the precincts, certainly in the time I have been here serving as an honourable member. I want to thank all of the staff, our catering staff, our janitorial staff, everybody who basically is part of the machinery that allows this house to be able to function, to be able to allow us to carry out the business of the general public. And certainly to thank all Barbadians for their continued support. We know that it's not always easy. We know that sometimes over the course of the last year, we have had to reflect on certain pieces of legislation. We've had to take more time to be able to consult, but we assure the general public that so long as we are the administration, that we understand how to listen to people, how to pull back when we have to, how to press gas when we have to, and how to make sure that we continue to do right by the people of this country. I think Barbados is doing well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, across, we're firing on all cylinders in terms of our tourism industry. We are seeing the signs of growth across the country, a lot of the hard work that has been put in. And I think I can speak on behalf of all honorable members in saying that we are truly grateful for the blessings that Barbados has had, certainly not being able to have the level of disasters that we have seen bestowed on other Caribbean islands. We've been able to be resilient and to be able to rise above a lot of the challenges that we have had over recent times. And for that, we are truly grateful, and perhaps I will go so far as to say that perhaps the good Lord is looking down on this little place from time to time, and may that long be indeed the case for all of us. So as I adjourn this session, I want to again thank all persons who make this possible and to wish you all a Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year. 2026, I'm sure we'll have lots of things that we have been looking forward to. I will leave those things for the Prime Minister to, when she wraps up, certainly to give us well wishes for 2026, but we look forward to 2026 being a year of transformation and certainly a year for us to be able to continue the good work that we have already started. With those few words, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I would wish to adjourn this chamber until the 6th of January, 2026.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Speaking on the adjournment, I would wish to associate myself with the words of the Honourable Leader of the House. I will have an opportunity to wish Barbadians Merry Christmas in another place and in another space. But at this stage, I would like to wish all who work here in Parliament, who support the business of Parliament, and the clerks at the table, to all who support them, to those who ensure that persons are sustained during long sit-ins by making sure that they're fed, to those who secure our safety, the police, and to those who, for whatever reason, whether it's maintenance or whatever reason, have cause to be able to engage that this Parliament functions. We take it for granted, but we ought not to, especially at this time in the world's affairs, because these things are not normally a matter that you can nowadays take for granted in most democracies. We have to work hard to be able to protect what we have, and we will continue to do so. The Honourable Leader spoke about the tremendous amount of work that the government has done this year in passing legislation and in resolutions. I want to thank all members of Cabinet for being able to ensure that the work of Parliament is there and that we are given the opportunity to be able to push forward things that will alter the circumstances of Bajans, whether in their households or in their businesses. I want in particular to thank the Honourable Attorney General and the Chief Parliamentary Council's chambers. I know what it is to be an Attorney General in this country, sir. And I can tell you that the volume of work that we are facing now and the pace and the pressure that we face today is considerably more than at any stage I have known it in the course of the last 35 or so years that I have been in public life. So I really want to place my gratitude to the Honourable Attorney General and to his staff for ensuring that the work of Parliament has moved apace. In many instances, he's had to turn around things in short periods of time with Herculean effort. So thank you. And to you, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I trust that you will also have a wonderful Christmas and a better 2026 for all kinds of reasons. 2026, I believe, is a year when we will have to seize our future and to ensure that we continue to keep Barbados safe, keep Barbados strong, keep Barbados stable, and keep Barbados for Barbadians prosperous. I also want to say that I regret that His Honor the Speaker is not here, but in his absence, I would also wish to wish him a very Merry Christmas and a prosperous New Year, and to thank him as I do you and your predecessor as Deputy Speaker, as well as the Chairman of committees, for ensuring that this House has functioned as efficiently as it has during the course of 2025. With those words, sir, Merry Christmas. God bless you. God bless this Parliament. God bless Barbados. God bless Bajans. And may we have a wonderful, blessed, and safe Christmas, but an even better and more transformative 2026. I thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Prime Minister. I wish to endorse your sentiments, Madam Prime Minister and Deputy Prime Minister, on the behalf of the staff and the management of the Parliament of Barbados. I too wish to extend our gratitude and to say a thank you to each and everyone who helped make this Parliament as active and productive as it was for the year 2025. I also wish to express and extend my greetings, for the Christmas holidays to each and everyone. I hope that everyone will have a blessed, enjoyable, healthy, productive Christmas. Whatever you do, just be safe. And may God continue to bless you in the year of 2026. I thank you. The motion is that this House do stand adjourned until January 6, 2026. All those members in favor, please say aye. All those against, please say no. I think the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned until January 6, 2026.